It started with whispers in the corridors of the Galactic Institute of Unified Intelligence, GIU for short, a place where hundreds of alien species mingled, studied, debated, and occasionally laughed behind closed doors at the same unspoken joke. Humans weren't allowed here anymore. 5 years ago, Earth had been banned from sending any further representatives. The official reason: instability and aggression inconsistent with the cooperative vision of the Institute. Unofficially, everyone knew it was because the humans didn't play by the same fragile rules the rest of the galaxy worshipped, like scripture. They argued too loud, solved problems too fast, fought too hard, didn't respect hierarchy, and worst of all, they won too often. Now, all that remained of humanity at GUE were a few archival records, some censored documents, and a single out-of-place item in the xenobiology section of the database, labeled *Terran cognition, behavioral abnormalities, and combat pathology *. It was in this environment that the mocking began, not by the professors, though their silence allowed it, but by a trio of alien students from the elite caste of the Valkyrie, known across systems for their vast intellect and cutting disdain. Today's lecture was supposed to be about cross-species cognitive development, but it turned into something else the moment Professor Howland stepped out of the chamber. That's how the Terran tried to explain quantum reaction reflex. Sneered Dolas, the tallest of the three, flexing his bioluminescent spines like it made him smarter. He literally said, and I quote, "Just punch it hard enough and the math works out." They all burst into laughter, even the quieter one, Tane, who usually hung back. Their laughter echoed down the chrome walls of the hall, triggering a few awkward glances from other species passing by. Species who remembered what the humans had done in their short time at GIU. And remember, snorted Urak, a slug-shaped thing oozing superiority. They still tried to hack the AI grading system to give themselves a plus scores. I mean, come on, that's not intelligence, that's desperation. They couldn't handle being average. Droll leaned back, his mocking voice shifting to an exaggerated growl. We are humans. We fight and cry and whine and build nukes out of spite. Roar. More laughter, until a voice interrupted them. That footage. Someone muttered from the side hall, almost casually. You seen it? The group turned. A shadowed figure stood there, short, cloaked in an old Earth-style coat, face unreadable. His ID tag just read, *research intern. Clearance restricted. Droll narrowed his eyes. Footage. The figure tilted his head. From the Nabari incident, the one sealed in Class 5 archives. But you guys are so smart, right? Maybe you can explain why 3 Terrans walked into a war zone with no backup, no approval, and walked out with 7 delegates from 6 species, including 1 Valkyrie, alive. Urak blinked. That's propaganda. No one has ever. It's not propaganda. The intern replied coldly. It's footage, real, unedited, from the helmet of Captain Lorne, human, banned, forgotten. Tane frowned. Why would we care? Some illegal savior complex garbage, emotional overload and blind risk-taking. The intern stepped forward. Because you're going to see it tomorrow. They've declassified it. Galactic Truth Initiative passed the vote this morning. For a second, none of the Valkyrie spoke. Then Dolas tried to brush it off with a sneer. Let me guess. Screaming, bullets, and more screaming. What are we supposed to do? Clap. The intern's face didn't change, but his voice lowered to something rough. No, you'll be too busy trying not to vomit. And then he walked away. Later that night, in a private network, Droll, Urak, and Tane accessed the restricted stream early through a bypass tool they weren't supposed to have. The footage began with static, then breathing, gunfire, screams, and then a human voice. Gritty, tired, angry, they ambushed the convoy. 7 delegates, no way out, no one's coming, so we go in. Quiet, brutal, efficient. They watched what happened next in silence, not because they were impressed, but because they couldn't look away. Humanity hadn't just fought. They became monsters to save the ones calling them monsters, and they did it without permission. The viewing chamber was quiet, not the kind of silence born from boredom or respect. This was the sound of disbelief. Dozens of students from different systems, species that prided themselves on advanced logic and refined emotional control, now sat as still as statues. Droll didn't move. His mandibles twitched, his eyes had gone dull, wide, uncertain. Even the chemical shimmer that normally danced across his skin had faded. Tane sat beside him, breathing in shallow gulps like his body was fighting itself. Urak had retreated into the back of his seat shell, silent and motionless. They weren't alone in their shock. On screen, the final scene looped one more time. The human, soaked in blood that wasn't all his, dragging a screaming Velcari delegate out of the wreckage. One arm shattered, bones visible, a grenade pin clenched between his teeth. He had no words left, just actions, and then came the final quote. Voice, over from the tribunal hearing after the event. The human Captain Lorne standing tall before the council. Asterisk, you abandoned them. We didn't. And if that offends your pride more than it shames your soul, you are never worthy of leadership. Asterisk, the screen faded to black. The lights in the room returned with a slow hum. No one spoke, not even the professors. They'd seen the truth, the kind of truth that didn't give space for interpretation or sanitized politics. They saw three humans, alone, weaponless, uninvited, walk into a hellhole created by bureaucratic cowardice, and walk out with the lives others were too afraid to risk saving. It was raw. It was ugly. And it was unmistakably human. Professor Howland finally broke the silence. His voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. You've now seen the declassified Nibari footage. This concludes the Mandatory Truth Initiative review. Please reflect appropriately. Class dismissed. Nobody moved. Nobody could. After a long pause, Droll rose, his legs wobbled, his posture crooked. He was still the tall, proud Velcari, but something in his frame had cracked. He didn't speak to Urak or Tane. He just walked. No, stumbled. Out of the chamber like a soldier who'd finally realized the war he trained for was never real, and the real war had already broken him. Outside, the Institute's halls buzzed with something new. Quiet shame, not loud guilt. Aliens weren't great with humility, but a shifting current of something harder to name. Old jokes about humans were no longer being whispered. A few were even being deleted from public channels and group archives. Memes mocking Terran aggression gone. Disrespectful AI bots quoting human rage quirks silenced overnight. In the corner of the lounge, Tane and Urak sat in silence. Urak finally spoke. I watched it again. Tane glanced up. Why, I don't know, Urak murmured. I thought if I saw it again, maybe it wouldn't feel so wrong, like I'd see the trick, the manipulation, but I didn't. Tane's jaw tightened. We made fun of them. We all did, Urak replied. It was easy. No one argued when they got banned. We all agreed. Too volatile, too undisciplined, too human. Tane ran a hand across his ridged brow. But they were the only ones who didn't hesitate. That scene where Lorne dragged the Texar out of the burning tank. He took shrapnel to the spine. The others told him to leave the body. He didn't even pause. Urak whispered, and the Texar was one of the species who voted for their banishment. A long silence passed. Then Urak said something he had never dared to before. I don't think we understand them at all. Meanwhile, deep in one of the Institute's archives, a hidden access point opened. The intern, the one who had warned them, leaned back in his chair and watched the access logs pour in. Dozens, maybe hundreds, students, faculty, even staff from other departments were watching the footage now. Some even pulled older files, unredacted interviews, mission logs, combat recordings, trial footage. He closed his eyes for a second. His name wasn't on the Institute registry. In fact, there was no real intern with clearance that high. But he hadn't lied. He had seen the footage. He was human. They had no idea how many of them were still watching from the shadows. Elsewhere, in a less formal chamber, somewhere between a cafe and a student debate center, Droll sat alone. He hadn't eaten, his eyes were sunken. Around him, other students occasionally passed by and gave him a look he'd never experienced before. Not respect, not fear, something closer to embarrassment. He was one of the loudest mockers. And now he was the fool. Then a small voice approached. "You were wrong." Droll looked up slowly. It was a Xeran, small, soft, spoken species, usually terrified of confrontation. She stood with a firm stance now, eyes locked onto his. "You made jokes. You called them savages, but you weren't the one bleeding in that tunnel. They were." Droll tried to defend himself, to speak, but the words wouldn't come. She leaned closer. "My uncle was one of the delegates. He owed his life to that savage, and you laughed at his pain." Then she walked away. For the first time in his life, Droll didn't feel superior. He felt small. A few days later, the Institute made another announcement. A new elective was being opened. Terran, Psychology, and Battlefield Ethics *. Voluntary for now, controversial, but the line of students signing up stretched out the door. Tane and Urak were both among them. When asked why, Tane gave a simple answer: "They did what we couldn't, and I need to know why." The intern watched from a distance again, eyes unreadable. He pulled out an old Terran dog tag from his pocket and stared at the name *Lorne*. Back on Earth, in a quiet underground outpost covered in satellite, disrupting dust and signal jammers, Lorne sat alone in a chair built for pain. The kind of chair only someone who lived through real war would ever feel comfortable in. He was older now, gray, bearded, hollow-eyed, skin stretched over old scars. A younger man approached him. "Sir, they finally released it." Lorne looked up slowly. "They saw it, yes." Lorne stared off into the distance for a long time. "I didn't save them for recognition," he muttered. "Didn't save them for guilt or pride or politics. I did it because no one else would. Simple as that." The younger man paused. "Some of them are apologizing." Lorne chuckled dryly. Too late for that, but maybe not too late for them. He stood slowly, spine cracking like dead wood. "Prepare the others. They're going to come looking." "For what?" Lorne's voice was flat. "For more truth." The students didn't fully understand it yet, but something had shifted in the galactic order. Humanity wasn't extinct. They weren't forgotten. They were remembered through footage soaked in truth and blood and rage and mercy. Not the kind of mercy that asked for applause, but the kind that crawled through fire with a body over one shoulder and a loaded pistol in the other hand. And soon, the Institute would face the hardest question of all. What if banning humanity was their greatest mistake, because monsters might be terrifying? But what if the monsters were also heroes? Within a week, the Galactic Institute didn't feel like itself anymore. The atmosphere, once filled with pompous lectures, smug debates, and condescending alien banter, had turned cold. No one cracked jokes about humans anymore. The word Terran wasn't followed by scoffs or memes. It was whispered now, like something forbidden or dangerous. The new elective course, Terran Psychology and Battlefield Ethics, was initially brushed off by the higher staff as an experimental offering, a gesture, a temporary fluke. Then the enrollments exploded. By the second cycle, 300 students had registered, more than any elective in Institute history. By the third cycle, students were being waitlisted. That was when the administration started to panic. Behind closed doors, an emergency faculty sum, it was called, we are witnessing a coordinated shift in student behavior, Professor Howland said, pacing before a ring of elder scholars and AI overseers. There's a growing fascination, no obsession, with human methodology. This is dangerous. A green-skinned Androvian scoffed. What's dangerous is how easily we allowed that footage to be distributed. It never should have been declassified. It was a mistake. Another voice cut through sharp, calculated. It wasn't a mistake. All heads turned. Dean C. Thor, one of the original founders of the Institute, stood at the edge of the chamber. His robes were heavier than usual. His face, a patchwork of cybernetic implants and old burned scars, bore the weight of centuries of war and wisdom. Some whispered he had even fought beside humans once, long ago, before the ban. "You are all afraid," Seath Or said. "And you should be, because that footage didn't glorify humanity. It reminded us how pathetic we've become." Gasps rippled through the room. "Look at our students now," he continued. "They're not interested in human culture or language or Terran history. They're dissecting their rage, their loyalty, their ruthlessness. They're studying human choice under pressure." One professor objected. "They're monsters." "No," Seath Thor cut in, voice like iron. "We are cowards." A silence, and no one had the guts to argue. Meanwhile, down in the lower levels of the Institute, an area previously reserved for outdated archives, the so-called Terran class was in session. Tane sat near the front, Urak beside him. Even Droll had shown up again, this time without a shred of his old arrogance. The class wasn't like the others. There were no holographic screens, no robotic aids, just a black console with physical keys and a dusty monitor, like the kind humans had once used. The lecturer was not a professor. He didn't have a title or a name anyone could pronounce. He was the intern, except now everyone knew he wasn't just an intern, he was one of them, a human. His eyes scanned the room, dead calm, no smile, no warm greeting, just his voice, coarse and clear. Asterisk, today's lesson, the fall of Delta 9 and the doctrine of sacrifice. Asterisk, he tapped the console. A low-resolution video began to play. It showed human soldiers hunkered down in a collapsed structure, surrounded, bleeding, one of them already missing half a leg. Their communication lines were down. The rescue fleet was 3 hours out, and yet none of them panicked. The human commanding officer gave a single order: "We hold, not for us, for the civvies upstairs." They fought for 6 hours, ran out of ammunition, switched to knives, and improvised traps. When the rescue finally arrived, 12 civilians were alive, and every soldier was dead. The footage stopped. The human speaker leaned forward. Question 1. Why didn't they retreat? A student in the back answered uncertainly. Because of orders. Wrong, he said flatly. The order was to evacuate. The commander chose to hold. Droll raised a shaky hand. Why? The man's voice turned colder. Because they'd rather die standing between hell and the innocent than live with the shame of running. That hit hard. No one spoke for a long time. Then Urak muttered under his breath, "We would have evacuated. Every species here would have. We'd have justified it later with logic." "Exactly," the human said. "That's why you lost respect for yourselves, and why you fear us." Later that night, a private message went viral. Anonymous, heavily encrypted, likely routed through 5 black market relays, but the content was simple: an image, a blood-soaked Terran dragging a soldier on his back. Captioned, "Banned, but not forgotten." By morning, Institute social networks were flooded with debates, reposts, secret discussion groups. A growing number of students began wearing old Terran military insignias. A quiet movement was forming, and it terrified the old guard. They tried to shut it down. They failed. Back in the High Assembly, Thor addressed the gathered senators of the Galactic Union. "Whether you like it or not," he said, "the myth of Terran irrelevance is dead. You can silence the footage. You can lock the archives. But the minds of our students are already infected. Not with propaganda, with respect." One senator growled. "What are you suggesting, that we invite them back?" Thor's smile was bitter. "I'm suggesting we no longer have a choice. On Earth, deep beneath the ashes of abandoned cities and scrubbed records, Lorne and his people were watching. Every ping, every day to trace, every forum and encrypted stream coming out of the Institute was being logged and monitored. They're turning." His lieutenant said. Lorne nodded. "Not enough yet, but they will." Another voice entered the room, gruffer, meaner. A younger human, arms crossed, eyes fierce. "Let me go up there," he growled. "Let them see what a real Terran looks like. Not filtered through a screen, not dressed up in history. Let me show them." Lorne glanced at him, then back at the streams. Soon, he said, not yet. Right now, they need to doubt their leaders, to question their truth. But when the time comes, he looked up, eyes steeled. We don't go to be accepted. We go to remind them why they needed us in the first place. Back at the Institute, the administration made one final desperate move. They suspended the elective. Students rioted. Not violently, not yet, but loud enough to send a message. Petitions were filed. Faculty were confronted. Footage was leaked of meetings where professors openly admitted to fearing human ideology. It was chaos. Tane stood on the steps of the East Dome with a makeshift sign around his neck. I'd rather learn from the monsters who saved lives than the cowards who abandoned them. Thousands joined him. The message was spreading, and then it happened. The holographic sky above the Institute, normally reserved for peaceful projections of unity and order, flickered. A new message appeared, untraceable, unstoppable. A single phrase, "We never needed your approval, only your honesty." Underneath it, the Terran emblem. Not long after, a transmission burst through the defense satellites over the Institute's sector, unmarked, undetected until it was too late to intercept. Lorne's voice, unfiltered, calm, cold. You banned us, called us dangerous, unstable, primitive, but when the fires came, when your structures collapsed, when your rules failed, we were the ones who ran toward the screams. We didn't do it for forgiveness. We did it because we are human, and we don't wait for permission to do what's right. If that scares you, then maybe the problem wasn't us. The screen went black, and just like that, nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same again. The days following the unauthorized transmission from Earth were chaos. Security, eh? I scrambled to trace the signal's origin, but it was like chasing shadows in a black hole. Every trace led to a dead path. Every timestamp contradicted the next. And by the time they managed to isolate a pattern, it was too late. The message had already gone viral across over 400 systems. Some called it a threat, some called it prophecy, but to the younger generation in the Institute, it felt like something else entirely, truth. Droll stood in front of his dorm mirror, unable to meet his own eyes. His spines no longer glowed. They dulled, a biological reflection of shame. He remembered the first time he laughed at a Terran's combat footage. He remembered how he mocked their desperation, how he called them a species that bleeds more than it thinks. Now, he could still see the face of that human from the Nabari footage. The man didn't shout slogans or beg for approval. He bled, he endured, he saved lives that had spat on his existence, and Droll couldn't stop thinking, would I have done the same? He knew the answer. Worse. So did everyone else. The halls of the Galactic Institute no longer echoed with debate. They throbbed with unrest. Dozens of student groups had formed overnight. They called themselves names like the Witnesses, True Archive, Legacy Holders, and most ominously, the Iron Debt, their symbol. A cracked image of Earth, half burning, half shining. Tane and Urak had joined Iron Debt not because they wanted war, but because they couldn't tolerate silence anymore. They met secretly in repurposed storage halls, learning human tactics, studying ancient Earth history, decoding battle ethics from centuries past. And for the first time since they arrived at the Institute, they felt purpose not assigned, not permitted, chosen. The High Council tried to stop it. Dean Seath, Thor, once silent, now stood openly opposed to the censorship orders being handed down. We teach them to question. He barked during a recorded session, but the moment they question us, we panic. What does that say about us? One of the counselors slammed his fist. This is how revolutions begin. See, Thor didn't flinch. Then maybe it's time we earned one. Inside the deepest archive of the Institute, hidden behind outdated shields and layers of bureaucratic forgetfulness, the intern sat again. But this time he wasn't alone. Tane, Urak, Droll, and 15 others had followed a path of encrypted breadcrumbs he had deliberately left for them. They entered the chamber quietly, nervous, unsure what they were about to face. He turned to them, not with a smile but with resolve. "I knew some of you would come," he said. Droll stepped forward, voice low. "You're really one of them." The man nodded. "Name's Cole. Corporal, Earth's last planetary infantry division, retired." "Dishonorably?" Urak squinted. "Why dishonorably?" Cole cracked a small, bitter smile. "Because I disobeyed a non-intervention order. I saved people who weren't human. Council didn't like that." Tane stared. "So you were punished for doing what was right." "That's the human way," Cole said. "We don't win because we're stronger. We win because we choose what others fear to face." He turned and pulled a cover off an old device. It was crude, metallic, worn. It bore an old symbol, a Terran wolf, fanged and scarred, staring down a collapsing star. "This," Cole said, "is the last unsealed command node from Earth's classified response protocol. It was meant to activate only if humanity was ever asked, begged, to return. It hasn't triggered yet. Not fully." Tane frowned. "Why not?" Cole turned to face them, voice dark and heavy. "Because the galaxy still hasn't asked. They're still pretending we're gone." Urak asked carefully, "And if they do ask?" Cole's answer was like a blade through the air. "Then we don't come back as students. We come back as consequence." Up above, the council held its last session behind closed doors. The footage from Earth, the spread of human ideology, the unrest among the students. It was spiraling out of control. They voted on emergency lockdown measures, martial law inside Institute grounds, AI enforcement drones, speech restrictions. The vote passed, barely. See, Thor walked out before the final tally. He didn't say a word. That night, he uploaded every archived footage of Terran's sacrifice, conflict, and survival to a decentralized galactic net. He titled the file, "The Ones Who Walked Through Fire," and then he vanished. The enforcement started within hours. Drones scanned hallways. Flags of Earth were torn down. Discussion groups were broken apart. Human sympathizers were detained for questioning. Cole's location was flagged and marked for raid, but it was too late. The students had already scattered, the message had already seeded, and Earth was already listening. Down on the edge of the Sol system, Lorne stood before a quiet command chamber. Dozens of humans surrounded him. Veterans, engineers, tacticians, even wars, guard civilians. Every one of them had lost something. A technician approached. Signal from GUE system. Emergency lockout triggered. Resistance groups forming. Protocol level 3 breached. Lorne nodded. "Begin Phase 1. A nearby officer looked up. "What's Phase 1? Lorne's voice came with the weight of unspoken vengeance. "Remind them that we were never gone." In the Institute, as lights flickered and lockdown orders were announced over the intercom, Cole gathered the small team inside the archive chamber. "You want out?" he asked. "Now's the time." No one moved. He nodded, then listened carefully. "This place runs on rules, bureaucracy, status. We run on instinct, and they've never known how to deal with that." He opened a crate and pulled out an old weapon, not armed, just symbolic. A Terran combat knife etched with the word unyielding. He looked each of them in the eye. "You've seen the footage. You know what we are, what we became. If you're going to stand with us, it's not just a rebellion. It's a declaration." Urak's hand tightened into a fist. "A declaration of what?" Cole smirked. "Of return." The Institute was no longer a place of learning. It was now a pressure cooker. Steam hissing through cracks the Council could no longer seal. Half the AI drones were refusing orders, repelled by logic loops after reviewing human behavioral models. Some professors were resigning, others were going into hiding, and somewhere in the walls, among the ventilation shafts and maintenance grids, the message was spreading: they are coming back, not as conquerors, not as teachers, but as something far more dangerous to a brittle galaxy, as mirrors, because what scared them most about humanity wasn't the weapons, wasn't the anger, wasn't even the blood. It was that somewhere deep down they saw themselves in us. And it made them ashamed. It started with a bang, not a metaphor, a real, physical explosion in the North Tower of the Galactic Institute, shattering windows and collapsing 3 floors, No one died, not this time. But it sent a message louder than any speech. We're done being silent. The administration claimed it was an accident, a reactor glitch, but those inside the Institute knew better. Rumors spread like wildfire. The iron debt had struck, not to kill, to awaken. Tane crouched behind a shattered statue in the East Wing courtyard, eyes scanning for patrol drones. The sky was red with emergency lighting, and the normal hum of Institute security systems was drowned out by shouting, chanting, running. His chest pounded. This wasn't a protest anymore, it was war. He checked his wristcom, patched into Cole's encrypted channel. Report. Urak's voice, calm as steel. East Wing secured. 73 students, no casualties. Your unit is holding the south gate. Cole's reply was short. Good, keep the drones distracted. We go live in 15, live. There was a pause, then the stream activated. Elsewhere, Urak ducked into cover behind a broken blast shield. 3 students at his side. He held a pulse jammer they'd rigged from scrapped tech, an old Terran trick Cole taught them. He activated it and watched a patrol drone spiral out of the sky. The students cheered, but Urak didn't smile. He stared up at the Institute walls, the same walls that once made him feel safe, prestigious, important. Now they looked like a cage, and he'd rather burn it down than stay caged another minute. In the command chamber, the administrators were in panic. This is treason, a counselor barked. We need military intervention, full wipeout. Professor Howland looked around, stunned. You're talking about executing students. They're radicals now. They were your students last week. They've been infected. You've seen what they're wearing. Human war sigils, rebellion tattoos, Earth insignia. The lead AI interface chimed in, glitching slightly as it calculated. Asterisk 72% of Institute students have engaged in or supported anti-administration behavior since the declassification event. Asterisk Helen whispered, we've lost them. Another voice echoed from the corner of the room. See Thor? No, he said. You never had them. The counselors turned to see him walking in through the emergency doors, dressed not in robes, but in old military gear, half ceremonial, half scarred by battle. You taught them obedience, he said, stepping forward, but the humans taught them purpose. Underground, Cole stood in a hidden studio, surrounded by hardwired tech. No galactic stream, no central comms. Just raw, patched-together systems like the old Earth resistance used to broadcast under planetary lockdowns. He looked into the lens. The red light blinked on, and the galaxy watched. This is Corporal Elias Cole, Terran Infantry Division. Dishonorably discharged, proudly defiant. You've seen our blood, you've watched us fall. You laughed when we were banned, but now you're watching your own institutions rot, and you're starting to understand why. We were never the threat. We were the reminder of what you once had, and threw away. You wanted peace without cost, unity without confrontation, survival without sacrifice. We didn't. We fought. We bled. We buried our dead and kept walking. Now your students are waking up. They don't want safe lies anymore. They want something real. We're not coming back to ask. We're coming back because you need us, whether you like it or not. The message flooded every system. Encrypted, unstoppable, mirrored through thousands of nodes planted by human sympathizers across the outer colonies. The reaction was instantaneous. Some systems went dark, blocking the stream. Others shared it again and again, but inside the Institute, it exploded like a virus through the halls. Students began chanting. Doors were smashed. Professors fled their offices. AI security bots glitched and crashed. And then the real shift happened. The non-human students, those from proud ancient civilizations, began rallying behind Terran war cries. Not because they wanted to become human, but because for once they understood them. In the chaos, Droll led a unit of 1, Silitist Velkari, the same species that once ridiculed Terran emotional instability. Now they were carrying human riot shields and quoting Lorne's battlefield doctrine. One of his subcommanders asked him, "Why do we follow their tactics?" Droll answered, Because their tactics don't care about pride, they care about victory. And for the first time in his life, he meant it. Back in the council chamber, everything fell apart. One of the drone commanders turned on the council. I refuse further commands under Section 8 Protocol, Civil Disobedience, Ethics Violation. This institution is no longer operating under lawful educational charter. Professor Howland collapsed into his chair. They've rewritten the system, he whispered. See, Thor stood behind him, watching fire burn across the distant towers. No, he said, they reminded it of what it was always supposed to be. In the South Gate battle, Urak took a hit to the shoulder. Nothing fatal, just a glancing stun round. He winced, bit down, and kept pushing forward. The pain was real, not simulated, not theoretical, and it felt like truth. His partner screamed, "Fall back." Urak looked at the advancing bots, then at the civilians hiding behind him. He grabbed a pipe and charged forward. That was humanity, not strategy, not logic, instinct. The students overran the AI core in just under an hour. The lockdown failed, the feed returned, and from the sky came the real turning point. Unmarked vessels, silent, no IFF tags, no diplomatic codes. They didn't ask for permission, they just landed, and when the doors opened, Terrans walked out. Not diplomats, not soldiers, not conquerors. Just men and women in old armor, carrying history on their backs and determination in their eyes. Lorne stepped out first. Students ran toward them, some in awe, some in fear. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't preach. He just walked through the broken gates of the place that had once exiled his kind, with the calm of someone who never needed a second invitation. Cole met him at the Central Plaza. They nodded. No salute, no speech. Just war. Forged understanding. Urak, Tane, Droll, and the others gathered around, their faces bloody, dirty, exhausted, but proud. Lorne finally spoke. You fought for this. Tane nodded. Not for power, for truth. Lorne smiled. Just barely. Then you already know what it means to be human. The Galactic Institute didn't collapse that day. It transformed. The old leadership resigned or vanished. The curriculum was overhauled. A new subject was added to the core educational system across the galaxy. Terran conflict ethics and moral adaptation. Optional, no. Mandatory. Some species protested. Some worlds rebelled. But deep down, everyone knew. The Terrans weren't back to rule. They were back to remind the galaxy of what it once valued. Honor without reward. Courage without permission. And truth without apology. Epilogue. 2 weeks had passed since the humans returned. The Galactic Institute, once a symbol of scholarly peace and control, now looked more like a refugee outpost. Half of the towers were still in ruins. Holographic banners were ripped or burned. Drones hung useless from cracked ceilings. But despite the destruction, there was something new in the air. A pulse, a sense of life. Where once there were quiet, careful corridors filled with over-politeness and intellectual arrogance, now there were voices. Loud ones, young ones, students who had survived the rebellion, walking shoulder to shoulder with the same Terrans they once mocked. Some in training, some still wounded, but all awake in a way they hadn't been before. Classes resumed, not with lectures but with stories. 6 systems have blocked our feeds. 3 more are echoing falsified broadcasts. That's not coincidence, it's coordination. Lorne nodded. They're trying to turn fear into policy. Tane stood near the door, now wearing a modified Terran field jacket. Then we fight back with what? Someone asked. We don't have an army. No, Lorne said. We don't. He stood slowly, voice low and even. But we have something they don't. Everyone turned to him. He stared into the distance, fists clenched. We have regret, and regret makes people brave in ways loyalty never could. On the outskirts of Veltrax, in a chamber filled with dying light, a final plan was put into place. A fabricated video, real footage, spliced, edited, twisted, Lorne shown firing on civilians, Cole torturing prisoners. The words rearranged, the context destroyed, and the narrative, the humans aren't here to help. They're here to conquer what they couldn't earn. The clip was sent to every neutral system in the quadrant. It spread fast, but this time it didn't go unanswered. The archive defense fired back, not with denials, but with the full, unedited versions, the truth, the context, the aftermath, and students from a dozen systems added personal messages. I was there when Lorne saved 30 unarmed civilians. Cole carried my friend out of a burning hallway. If they're monsters, then I want to learn from monsters. The fight wasn't for land, it was for belief, and belief was beginning to turn. Urak stood atop the rebuilt Institute tower, staring into the sky. He knew the war wasn't over. He knew they'd lose friends. Maybe even Earth would fall again, but he also knew something else. They were no longer fighting for humanity. They were fighting for the right to be human, to be flawed, stubborn, loyal, dangerous, and unrelenting in the face of clean, sterile lies. And for that, he would bleed. Final transmission, you banned us, called us monsters, but when the galaxy burned, we were the ones who ran toward the fire. Not for glory, not for power, because it was the right thing to do. Remember that, when history judges us all. Captain Lorne, Terran Expeditionary Force.